just a normal week in the life of a big-time athletic director last week for Bubba Cunningham. Go to the conference meetings and have discussions that will shape the future of college sports as we know it. Then go watch one of your preeminent programs win an NCAA championship. Then come home and be on the Carolina Insider.
Yeah.
Does it get any better than your last week?
It does not. And every one of the things that you mentioned got better.
That's right. It's a step up every time.
Right till this, to absolute peak of my week, right here.
Well, then let's start with the second place part of your week, which was watching Carolina women's tennis win an NCAA championship in Orlando. You were there. Brian Calvis has been right on the edge for a long time. What was it like to see that program able to do it, and against a team that they knew well?
It was absolutely fantastic. So much fun. We obviously we split during the regular season, and we win the doubles point, and you think, boy, this is going to be, we'll win 3 of these pretty easily. Not so much. We're down on courts 4, court 5, and then Scotty's down 6-3 in a tiebreaker in the first set. It was unbelievable. I've been pretty good over my career of not getting too emotionally wrapped up into the events. The Final Four against Duke, when I had to leave my seat with 3 minutes to go, and Saturday night, I could not stand still. I mean, it was ridiculous. I actually left the arena, or the stadium, what do they call it, and went to the media tent and started watching it on television. And because every time I went to a court, we lost the point or the set.
We know the problem was there.
Hello. And so and then I just felt a lot better over there, and then I came back, and then I was able to gut it out for the team.
I know.
It was really so much fun. And the thing that was really cool about it, so instead of joking around, winning the doubles point, you think it is going to be fairly easy. And then when you go down, and they came back. And we talked to a couple of the kids on the team after the event, and we said, what were you thinking when you were down? And both of them said they were going to have to peel me off this court. I was not leaving this court. Down 5-1, down 6-3, and coming back. It was just something that they've learned over time, winning all those indoor championships. And they were at the biggest stage, at the toughest time, they were able to dig down and do something special that they've never done before, which I thought was really, really cool.
We're super lucky here at Carolina to have so many high-level programs and high-level coaches. Brian Calvis has firmly established himself in that conversation and has a while ago. What is it about him in your mind that has allowed him to cultivate such a level of success now for a long time with that program?
I wish I could put my finger on the thing. Boy, if we knew that, we could we could replicate it and be, we'd win every championship out there. But I think that, the lack of transfers, the sense of family, the sense of we're going to recruit great players. We're going to have a great experience together. It doesn't matter who plays 1 or 2. We're going to switch the lineup every now and then. He's been able to maintain that. And what I thought was really cool, his mom and dad were there. His brothers and sisters were there. He had a lot of family. And so we talk about the Carolina family, talk about the family within the tennis program. It was the embodiment of all of that. It was very special. We had a ton of fans that traveled. To have that many fans go to Orlando to support tennis, it may not be unique, but it certainly is rare. And it was great to see. So I think that's what it is. I think it's the relationships, the genuine authenticity that he brings to what he does every day really sets him apart.
You've gotten to do that twice now this school year, where you've gotten to experience a national championship with the Carolina team, which I have to imagine is one of the highlights of what you get to do. How do you balance that, which in this case is field hockey and women's tennis, with the fact that earlier in the week you were talking about college athletics in a way that really didn't touch on those two things at all? Like, how do you figure out how that works together?
Well, it's funny you raise that because what I experienced Saturday night is why we are in the business of what we do, giving the kids opportunity to go to college, participate in a sport that they absolutely love. What is most challenging is the business associated with college sports today. And it's funny that we're talking about this because this morning I actually wrote out, so I could see it, and I didn't bring it with me, I should have, are all the contradictions in sport today. And that's what's driving me out of my mind. We talk about a $1 billion television contract for the NCAA basketball tournament and student athletes. We say that we don't have any money in the ACC, and we're so far behind. And we have multi-million-dollar salaries and incredible facilities. It's so we talk about education is the absolute core of what we do. Yet we've opened up the transfer portal, and you can come and go. And we know that you won't graduate as often if you do that. So it's the contradictions that we have in sport that's what we need to solve. But the reason we're in it is for the kids and the relationships and those things. And then last Sunday is graduation. We had 141 students graduate. That's what we're here for. That's the number one thing we're doing. So, the job of the economics, the job of the conference affiliation is an intellectual challenge, but the emotional support and the emotional charge of what we do are the student athletes and the families.
Do you think everyone in the room agrees that that's the main thing they're in it for?
I think that's changed over time. Everybody's a little bit different, but I think ultimately people realize that really is the foundation of what we do, and we get distracted a lot. Lawsuits distract you, the media distracts you, all the reports, the different social issues distract you. But when I always think about decision making, if we would make decisions based on our fundamental values of education and opportunities to play, you'd be able to defend what you're doing much more than you can if you make inconsistent decisions based on things that appear to be right at the time that really don't support your values.
Want to get to ACC meetings and the whole grant of rights conversation in just a second. I'd just be interested in your thoughts on the season, the year in total for Carolina. Still, baseball's ACC tournament this week. Men's golf is heading to the championship round in the NCAA tournament. I think there'll still be some track and field action as well in there. But for the most part, coming to the close here, your thoughts on the 22-23 year for the Tar Heels.
Well, I think it's been another great year. I do. You mentioned 2 national championships. We had an ITA national championship in there as well. We have some sports that are exceedingly successful and some that are struggling a little bit. But when you have 28, that's the way it's going to be. You have a big family. Sometimes somebody's struggling a little bit, and you're, the moms always say you're only as happy as your most least happy child. And, I'm only as happy as my least happy team. And, some of our teams are doing great, but, we didn't make it in the basketball tournament. We had a little down year in men's basketball. We had a couple other sports that didn't make the NCAA. So what can we do to ensure that we're better next year? But I think we had a great year, and I'm always optimistic. And anytime we're with the kids, as I mentioned, 141 of them graduated. We had the academic luncheon a couple of weeks ago, and we had, I can't remember the number, 30 or 40 students that had 4.0s. I mean, other than you two, I don't know how many people had those kind of grades.
That's right.
It's just different now.
Yeah, though we've set the bar high, Adam.
You made some coaching extensions here recently. Scott Forbes in baseball and Joe Bresci in men's lacrosse and Courtney Banghart in women's basketball. When you're deciding when and how the right time to do those types of things might be, what do you take into account and how do you decide how to move forward with that?
Well, it wasn't that long ago that we only had 3 coaches under contract. We had football, men's, women's basketball. And so about 8 or 9 years ago, we started creating contracts for all of our head coaches. And they were staggered at different times, 3 years or 5 years. So a lot of these cycles now are because the coaches' contracts are coming due. And we had, I believe, 8 contracts come due this year. So that's where I put the primary focus. And now we're starting to look out to the future years and say, okay, somebody's a year or 2 out. Let's start thinking about extending them or having the conversation that, things aren't working out and we're going to make a different decision as we move forward. But, the number one thing is, are we successful? Are we fulfilling the needs of our students while they're here? And are we moving them toward graduation? And as long as we can check the boxes on those 3 things, then we're going to extend them because I think we have a great group of coaches.
Why was it like that? Why were only 3 coaches under why did that change occur?
I think the economics changed. I think that coaches got more reliant. I think it became the industry standard. I think we were kind of behind the times a little bit, not having contracts for our coaches, the little bit of insecurity that if I'm year to year,
right,
the coaching competition. And so I think it just made more sense for us to do that.
Imagine Bubba walking in to see Jenny Levy and be like, "Hey, you gonna be the coach next year?
Yeah.
We're good. All right, good. Keep up the good work, everybody."
All right, let's go back to last week. Of course, ACC meetings, and then right before the ACC meetings began, there was the report of the 7 teams in the ACC that had been, in some ways, meeting about the grant of rights. North Carolina was included in that group of 7 teams. What was your reaction when you saw that, and kind of what was your atmosphere like there for a couple of days?
Well, when we got there, I think the news may have broken that day. So there was an elephant in the room early. So the very first day we said, let's get together and just talk about it with everybody. And all of the individual schools have talked about, what is our grant of rights? Every school in the conference has sent somebody to Greensboro to take a look at the contract. Is there a way for us to generate additional revenue? What's our relationship with ESPN? And so individually, collectively, we began to talk about it. Probably getting 6 or 7 schools together at one time, it was fine if you were in the group. If you're not, then it was a little disappointing.
Sure.
And I understand that. And I think that's probably the lesson that we learned is it's like anything else in life, it comes down to a communications issue. We all were talking about the same thing individually, and you just need to share your thoughts with the collective group when you're involved with a group like that. It can be very uncomfortable. But I think that's what we came away with, saying we're going to think about different options. Some of us will agree with some will disagree, but we're better off talking about it as a group as opposed to a subset of the larger group.
I like how this grant of rights is in Greensboro. And look, it's like the Constitution. Like, you can come there and look at it, but we're not emailing it to you.
That's right.
Like, can't Nicolas Cage go steal this or something so that to get it out of the temperature-controlled vault?
That's a great question. That's one I really haven't given enough thought to, Adam.
It's
but
easy.
I'll tell you what, if something happens to that bad boy, we know where to look.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. Nicolas Cage. I thought Whit Babcock, the AD at Virginia Tech, had a pretty good perspective and said something to the effect of, like, if you say you're happy with everything, then your fans are all mad. But if you say you're not happy with everything, then it's really awkward in the room and everybody looks at you like you're some derelict or something. So how do you balance all these people that you're trying to deal with when in some way, all of it is true? Like,
it is true, and I think you just try to acknowledge that. Yeah, financially, we are behind today. Long term, the gap looks really big. But there's so many things going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years that really will shape the future of college athletics. We have continuing litigation, whether it's the House case, the Johnson case, which have to do with Alston or have to do with academic benefits. We have the National Labor Relations Board, which has to do with employment. So all of those things will shape our future. Whether we get to the end of those contracts, no one really knows. We don't know what the relationship between the student and the university will look like. So it's part of the speculation, and we all kind of get sucked into it because you feel like it's immediate. We need to resolve some of those contradictions that I talked about earlier. But the other thing I look back on, and I was reading an article today that, if you look at all was Pat Forty wrote about the 28 championships the NCAA offers, the Pac-12 has 8, we have 7. And I would think that the two of us are at the lower end of the economic media rights. So we seem to be doing something okay.
Right. And you've talked about employment before, or at least mentioned that is something that is being discussed, trying to figure out where that moves going forward. If all of a sudden North Carolina has 200 student employees, like how do you even handle that? How financially, how do you handle that?
It really depends on what that looks like. I don't know. I try not to speculate on it. I do internally, but
I understand.
Whether we currently have 800 student athletes. We have 300 full scholarships. About 500 of our 800 student athletes get some type of a scholarship. Does that convert to some type of more of a compensation model as opposed to a scholarship model?
Right.
I mean, ultimately, that's, I think, how you would pay for it if it went in that direction. I don't know. I mean, the California bill, there's a bill pending in California right now about revenue sharing. And so if we are to take some of the television revenue and share it with these student athletes in a different way than we do today, I mean, I feel like we're in a revenue share already.
Right.
We take in all the money and we share it among 800 student athletes. That, to me, is revenue sharing. But the discussion as of late, which we've talked about in here plenty, is if you generate the money, you should get it. So the revenue share is a little more narrow than what it has been previously. So, and whether or not you're taxed on it becomes a question. So, again, those are the economics of what we do that you have to talk about, but it's not why we do what we do. It is getting back to, let's talk about the education the kids are getting. Let's talk about the experiences they have, and how do we continue to maintain that.
In all seriousness about the grant of rights, I think part of the confusion is that no one's actually seen it. So all this speculation comes out. Well, I heard that if this happens, then that occurs. Is there an actual number of if this many schools decide to leave, the conference just vaporizes and it doesn't exist anymore? Is that an actual thing that exists?
Well, as you can imagine, the grant of rights doesn't, one, speak to that. I mean, that's all in the conference bylaws and things of that nature. But with 15 schools and a conference, and 15 schools with their own general counsel and their own general counsel staff, and then their outside counsel, you've probably got 30 to 45 different opinions on how that might come to pass.
Go ahead, Don.
All of whom get paid to have a different opinion than the other 29.
Yeah, and I'm glad I'm here to just clear that up for you.
On one hand, you think, okay, you're these conference members, so you guys should be working together to try to figure things out. And then there's also this thought, and you touched on that maybe there were some hard feelings or some challenges that maybe some schools thought other schools were doing something that they didn't know about. How do you try and have that still working together nature of all the teams in the conference while you also all know that you're looking at this and thinking about possibly doing something else? Does that question make sense?
It does, but that's one of the challenges in higher education. It's a challenge in politics. It's a challenge, obviously, within our league. I mean, half our league is a public school, half is private. We have 28 teams. Boston College has 31. I don't know, somebody probably has 16.
Right. Clemson or somebody has lower.
So you have a whole variety of interests. So every issue that comes along, you have a different perspective. And the only way you get anything done is by having a majority of the people agree with a certain position. So, everybody says politics are local, and they are. So if we want to change something within our conference, we need to get 8 people to agree on it. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, we're going to agree that we're going to add these coaches, or we're going to not do something. And so that's what we're trying to do. But when 7 of us got together and said, okay, what are we going to do economically? This is a challenge for us. What do we want to do differently? Yeah, we probably should have included everybody on that conversation. Or we should have gotten to them more quickly, because you're going to have, Adam and I are going to agree, then we're going to talk to you maybe, and then we're going to talk to ones that we think might not agree. And so I think we were trying to build a little coalition, but, I think we'll do a better job of that going forward.
Coach Smith always used to say in recruiting that he didn't spend any time talking about the other schools because he felt like he had enough to talk about with North Carolina, that there was no need to talk about the other schools. I think in general that's kind of been how Carolina has worked. Is it hard to maintain that feeling when someone comes out and says, well, we're the best in this whole conference, we bring more value than anyone? How do you balance that with, well, I know people just might have to say that, I know what the truth is?
Yeah, I think that's the case. I mean, everyone who's speaking is talking to their audience. That's the thing about college sports we've talked about. We're not competing for fans. The Carolina fans are Carolina fans. They're not going to switch and all of a sudden be a fan of somebody else. I think here in North Carolina, we always try to get the guy that's moving in from New York, we're trying to get them to cheer for us, or the guy that's moving in from Michigan. But as far as the loyalty as to where he went to college. But we do want to talk about the strength of the league, which I think is really important, the breadth of our league, the diversity of our league. I think those things are what make us really strong, but it also is what makes it the most challenging, because we're not all the same. If we were all the same, it would be a lot easier to drive to a specific agenda, but we don't have that. And so it's the blessing and the curse.
Are there any important moments over the next couple of months, or dates or decisions that a casual college athletics fan or a Carolina fan should pay attention to that you feel like will be important as we move through this couple of months before the action really gets going again in August?
That's a great question. I'm not sure the specific date, but I listened to Charlie Baker talk about hiring Bain & Company to do an assessment of the NCAA, and I believe that's going to be completed in July. So I'd look for late summer, early fall to kind of see what the findings of that report is. We've talked about the Transformation Committee, and some of those things are rolling out now. And I think the Bain report and the Transformation Committee, I think between those two, I think that'll kind of set the direction for Charlie Baker and the association. There's certainly legal cases. I mentioned two of them: the House case and the Johnson case, and the National Labor Relations Board, which just recently heard a claim against USC. So those are the legal issues. And I think, a lot of discussion on Capitol Hill is, will Congress act on a bill for NIL prior to August or prior to September when the election gets into full swing? So those are key dates. Whether we get consistency across the states because of the congressional intervention, I think will happen between now and the fall. I can't predict what that will be.
Sure.
But I think those are probably the three biggest things that I would keep my eye on the next 6 months.